So, let me get back to the beginning of this with the stars you were talking about at the beginning that burnt helium and hydrogen. Mm-hmm. Them blowing up would be what the Big Bang Theory is about, right?
Well, this is called the Big Bang, and the man who invented this name was an English astronomer named Fred Hoyle. And he invented the name to mock the idea that there was a beginning. He didn't want there to be a beginning because that would suggest that the Bible was true and that there was a God, and he didn't want there to be a God. Mm. So he tried very hard all his life to figure out if all of the elements, including hydrogen, could be made in the interior of stars, or including helium. But it turned out that in that case, there would have only been one day of darkness and light. That is the stars,
and that's been disproved by the.
It's been disproved because it couldn't be done. There had to be the first few minutes, the first 3 minutes of the first morning, were what formed the hydrogen and the helium, and then the other elements were formed later. So
within those stars, and then.
Yeah, right. So there really had to be 3 days before the Earth was ready, and not 2. So okay. Hoyle was proved wrong.
But there was it's kind of a big bang when those stars blow up, and it's a bang.
When he said Big Bang, he wasn't referring to the stars blowing up.
He was referring to like a big egg in space blowing up. One big thing of
right,
everything.
At the very beginning, and that's what he mocked. See, what he wanted was, instead of one Big Bang, he wanted little poofs. The idea was, he said, well, how do we know that though the universe is expanding, somehow maybe all the space gets filled up? See, if the universe were expanding forever, and there never was a beginning, then after an eternity of time, all of the galaxies would be infinitely far away from each other.
Mm. And in that case, there would be no end to the universe.
Right, but also we couldn't see any galaxies because we can look. If they're all infinitely far away, you can't see them.
That makes sense. Right. Okay.
So
you're saying the universe is confined to a certain size?
Since we can see galaxies at a certain distance, they're not infinitely far away, then we know that the expansion has not been going on forever. Because if it
the universe is a given size, is that?
Well, it's a given density. We don't know if it's a given size or not. The point is that the galaxies are not continuously created. Mm. What Hoyle wanted there to be was that every century or so in a cubic meter of space, a hydrogen atom would just appear out of nothing. Poof, there's a hydrogen atom, and then poof, poof, 2 more hydrogen atoms. And these would...
Sounds kind of fun.
Well, these would get together and they would form new stars and new galaxies, and they'd fill in the spaces as the galaxies were expanding.
Because the expansion would create these random hydrogen...
Yeah, right. They would get together in the empty spaces and make new galaxies to fill it in.
Okay. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and this way he liked it because a lesser God who could only create 1 hydrogen atom at a time is not to be feared so much as a God who can create a whole universe all at once.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
So he had this thing, but the thing is that if new galaxies are being formed in our vicinity to fill in the spaces left as the old galaxies moved out, it would be like any town where you have a mixture of old people and middle-aged people and young people and infants. But that is not what we see when we look. The galaxies close to us, and therefore not very far away, are all about the same age as ours. And as you look farther, you're seeing them as they were when they emitted the light. So the farther and farther you look, the younger they look, and finally you reach a point where there aren't any. That is, before their infancy, they weren't there.
Well, that makes sense.
So his idea has been disproved, and his way of getting rid of the beginning has also been disproved.
So we can say there was a beginning.
That's right.
Why?
But the name sticks because it mocks the idea of, it trivializes the idea of a beginning.
Mm.
They don't even call it the big boom. You know, a cannon makes a boom. They make it, you know, big bang, like it was just a pistol shot.
Mm. But it's interesting that I think anyone on this planet has the notion that there was a beginning and there was something before us.
Mm-hmm. And that's just what the Bible says, and that's why they hate the idea that the atheists hate the idea that the Bible could have been right about anything. But
yeah, I've seen that. But yeah.
but it is. You know, you can prove Einstein's discovery that material and energy are just things that can be converted the one into the other. God started by doing the work necessary to put energy into the heavens, and then the energy fractured itself. The very high energy rays collided with each other, and sometimes they produced material like protons, neutrons, electrons. Sometimes they just broke up into smaller rays like heat and light rays. And so the universe was not made out of some pre-existing material that God fashioned as an artisan, but it was literally made out of his work, because he did the work necessary to provide the energy.
Just the beginning little
Yeah.
push.
Mm-hmm. You know, it says the heavens are the work of your fingers. So, you know, here I've got a little flashlight here. Now this flashlight doesn't have conventional batteries, and you can see right now it's not emitting any light.
Yeah.
What it has is a crank, and if I turn the crank, it starts producing electricity, and that electricity comes out the diodes and makes light that you can see. So you can say that the work of my fingers is coming to you as light.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way God did it too.
And it continues emitting a little bit afterwards, or?
Yeah, it's got a little storage battery so that it can save that for, keep on emitting it for a little while.
Mm.
But in the same way, God did the work necessary to provide the energy, and the energy is still rumbling around the universe, providing heat and light, which are needed for life, and the material vehicle that life requires, the atoms, the hydrogen, the carbon for carbon-based life forms and so forth, like us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of nuts.
Mm-hmm. So actually, although the myth that the modern-day atheists are propounding is that the Bible is a bunch of myths, but actually the truth is that the Bible has the correct story, but it was written thousands of years before the discoveries of the 20th century, like Einstein's discovery.
Or understanding that a day wouldn't necessarily mean the revolving of the earth.
That's right. Yeah, it's all hinges on the interpretation of the Bible. The atheists interpret the Bible to make it look ridiculous, but that isn't the true interpretation. And
that's not what's written black and white.
No. If we're all nonsense, why would it outsell all of their books? People understand that the Bible has a lot more value than the atheists would give it.
Mm.
Even in the scientific realm, I can prove that the idea of the expansion in the heavens was not a discovery of Edwin Hubble, the astronomer. It's there in the Bible thousands of years before, and Hubble just actually measured the expansion later than he was.
So you're saying he didn't discover it, but he measured it?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And then that material can convert into energy. Energy can convert into material. This was Einstein's relativity, but actually the Bible was already talking about how God made the world out of things that did not appear. In other words, it doesn't say he made it out of nothing. That's a philosophical concept which is not in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It says he made it out of, that it's the work of his fingers. In other words, that energy converted itself into material through processes that we can duplicate in the laboratory.
So Have you done any of these processes or been present during any of that type of experiment?
They're done all over the world in laboratories. Another time is if you want to observe it in nature, you can observe the aurora borealis, or the northern lights or the southern lights.
I've been to Iceland, but I missed that.
Yeah, right.
I'll have to go back.
I have seen this sometimes, because sometimes they come down as far as northern latitudes. I saw northern lights actually in Connecticut a number of years ago.
That seems really south.
Yeah, well, it is, but if the storm of light is really intense, then it can reach that far. Anyway, astronauts have photographed the auroras from space. They get above the atmosphere, and what happens is the atmosphere lights up with a light that's not illuminated from below. It just lights up, but there is no visible source for it.
So the light's coming out of nowhere, theoretically. Well, nowhere, out of something that's invisible.
It seems to come out of nowhere. It actually comes out of something that's invisible.
It's the gases, right?
Well, it's it's partly particles, that is a very dilute gas hitting the atmosphere, but it's also some of it is just gamma rays, that is pure energy hitting the atmosphere at, say, a height of 90 kilometers or something like that in the atmosphere. And then when they hit an atom, they split up, and some of the rays are reduced to light waves. A little fragment of the high energy of the gamma ray becomes a light ray, and so you can see the light.
So it's energy hitting matter and turning into light.
That's right. Yeah, and or
wow.
And also the conversion. The energy may actually convert into matter if two rays, gamma rays, hit each other. So it occurs in nature. Probably in ancient times they didn't observe it, but somehow Moses wrote about it thousands of years ago, even though he had never observed it. Because, or the psalmist says, the heavens are the work of your fingers. And actually, the very fact that the first light is visible, it wasn't visible before there were telescopes, but Moses says, the first visible thing in the universe was the first light. And he puts that long before the sun. We know now that the sun could not have existed until the elements were made in the early stars, because the sun is a yellow star. It burns at a lower temperature, not blue, white, but yellow, because it has carbon in it, and the carbon keeps...
it cools it down, or...?
It acts as a catalyst for the reaction. Actually, it goes from carbon up to oxygen, and then it drops back again. But if it didn't have the carbon in it, it could still burn, but it would burn at a higher temperature, and therefore it'd be blue-white, and it would be too intense for the life on the Earth. It would make too much ultraviolet light. Actually, the yellow light is very suitable for illuminating the Earth, because that is the maximum sensitivity of the human eye, and it is also the place where the atmosphere transmits most light. It is a blue-white star would make too much ultraviolet, which would knock the organic molecules apart.
So we basically disintegrate?
Yeah, or we would never form.
Wow.
And a red star would not make enough colors like green and blue so that the plants would not live, they wouldn't live well. They need the brighter colors, more energetic colors to run photosynthesis. So the sun has just the right mix of catalyst, but that catalyst was made in the earlier stars. Therefore, a star like the sun could not have existed in the second morning. It had to wait until the third morning. And that's exactly, the Bible puts the sun supporting vegetation. The sun was not created on the fourth day, according to the Bible. It says that The sun is part of the heavens and the earth.
Mhm.
Therefore, it was created on the first day, but it wasn't formed until later. It was on the fourth day.
So its molecules existed
Yeah,
with
those
the first.
molecules existed,
That
but
makes
they
sense.
weren't put together into a star yet.
Mm.
But God knew which molecule was going to, go into the sun and so forth.